The invincible fleet arrives. The Galactic Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, destroyed entire civilizations, and crushed any species that dared to resist. Their warships were massive, covered in thick armor, and armed with the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. No one had ever stood against them and survived. And now, their next target was Earth. Admiral Xivan stood tall in the command center of the Imperial dreadnought Tyrant's Wrath, the pride of the Empire's fleet. Around him, dozens of officers worked on glowing control panels, monitoring the fleet's approach to the Sol system. The Empire had sent over 200 warships, enough to annihilate any planetary defenses within minutes. A young officer approached, saluting nervously. "Admiral, we are entering Earth's system. Long-range scanners detect a small fleet of human ships." Cleveland frowned. "How many?" The officer checked his datapad. "Only 12, sir." The bridge fell silent for a moment. Then the officers exchanged amused looks. Some even chuckled. The idea that humans would try to fight back with just 12 ships was ridiculous. Tyvon smirked. "So they think they can resist us? How foolish. Open a transmission to the human fleet." A few seconds later, the view screen flickered, revealing a human officer. He had gray hair, a calm expression, and a strange glint in his eyes, like he was holding back a joke. "This is Admiral Xivan of the Galactic Empire," the Imperial leader declared. "Your ships are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now, and we will make your destruction painless." The human didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at Xivan. Then suddenly he smiled. And then he laughed. The officers on the Imperial bridge stiffened. Was this human laughing at them? "Ah, Admiral," one of Tyvon's officers whispered. "I think something's wrong." But Xivan ignored him. "Human," he growled. "Did you not hear me? Your forces are nothing compared to ours. You are defenseless. You should be begging for mercy, not laughing." The human officer took a deep breath, wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh man," he said, shaking his head, "this is going to be so much fun." Tyvon clenched his fists. "You dare to mock us? Fine. Fire warning shots. Show them we mean business." The command was given, and several Imperial warships fired their plasma cannons. The deadly energy bolts streaked toward the human ships. But then, something impossible happened. The human ships didn't move. They didn't activate shields. They didn't dodge. They just sat there. And when the plasma blasts hit, they simply vanished. There was no explosion, no damage, nothing. It was as if the weapons had been swallowed by thin air. The Imperial officers stared in shock. What just happened?" one of them whispered. Xivan's eyes narrowed. It must be some kind of trick. Fire again. Full power. This time, the entire fleet fired. Hundreds of plasma bolts, enough to destroy a planet, raced toward the tiny human force. And once again, they vanished. The bridge of the Tyrant's Wrath was now completely silent. Then, to Xivan's horror, the human officer on the view screen started laughing again. This time, the laughter was louder, and behind him, the other human officers were also chuckling. One of them even held up a bag of something yellow and crunchy. "Hey, you guys want some popcorn? This is getting good." Xivan slammed his fist on the control panel. "Enough. Prepare boarding parties. If our weapons don't work, we will take their ships by force." But before he could give the final order, something even stranger happened. One of the human ships disappeared. Xivan's mouth opened slightly. "Where?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ship reappeared directly behind his fleet. It had moved faster than any known technology in the galaxy. A new voice spoke through the Imperial speakers, a human voice, but full of amusement. "Oh, you poor guys. You really thought this was a battle, huh?" Xivan's blood ran cold. He had been leading fleets for decades, had fought wars across the stars. But never had he encountered an enemy that treated war like a game. Then the human admiral leaned forward on the screen, his smile never fading. "All right, Emperor's lapdogs. Since you're new here, let me explain something real simple." The humans in the background leaned in, smirking. "You're in our playground now." And then, for the first time in his career, Admiral Xivan felt true fear. First contact, or first mistake. Admiral Xivan's face twisted with rage. But deep inside, he felt something unfamiliar. A cold, creeping sensation crawled up his spine. Fear. The humans weren't reacting like any species the Empire had encountered before. When facing overwhelming force, most civilizations either surrendered or begged for mercy. But these humans, they laughed. They mocked. And worst of all, they acted like they were playing a game. But this wasn't a game. Xivan clenched his jaw and turned toward his officers. "Deploy the Vanguard fleet. I want their ships surrounded. No more tricks." Hundreds of Imperial fighters shot forward, forming a tight ring around the 12 human ships. They aimed their weapons, preparing for a coordinated strike. The humans still did nothing. Not a single defensive maneuver. Not a single shield activation. It was as if they didn't even consider the Empire a threat. A low growl escaped Xivan's throat. What are they waiting for? His communications officer hesitated before speaking. "Sir, they're taking bets." Xivan blinked. "What?" The officer gulped. "We intercepted their transmissions. They're betting on how long it will take for us to realize we can't win." Xivan's hands trembled with fury. These arrogant creatures, how dare they insult the might of the Empire? "Enough," he roared. "Open fire. Wipe them out." The fleet obeyed instantly. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles roared toward the human ships. The void of space lit up with destruction. But then, nothing. Not a single human ship took damage. The missiles detonated, but the explosions simply disappeared. The energy blasts hit, but they were absorbed into nothingness. The humans still did not move. Xivan felt a knot in his stomach. What is this sorcery? And then, finally, one of the human ships moved. But it didn't just move. It vanished. One moment, it was surrounded by Imperial fighters. The next, it was right in the middle of the Empire's fleet, floating lazily between massive warships. Xivan's breath caught in his throat. No ship should be able to move like that. A transmission came through the Imperial fleet's main channel. The human admiral's voice, calm and full of amusement, echoed across every Imperial warship. "All right, you've had your fun. Now it's our turn." The human ship winked out of existence again. A second later, a dozen Imperial ships exploded at once. Not from enemy fire, not from external attacks. They simply self-destructed. Xivan's officers gasped in horror. "Sir, systems are failing across the fleet. Weapons are locking onto our own ships. Engines are shutting down." Another officer screamed, "Admiral, we've lost control off." Boom. Another wave of explosions ripped through the Imperial fleet. Warships that had once conquered entire civilizations were now helpless toys, crumbling without explanation. On the Imperial bridge, panic spread like wildfire. Officers shouted over each other, trying to regain control, trying to make sense of the impossible. Then, another voice cut through the chaos. Not human, not Imperial, something else. A deep mechanical voice echoed through every warship, its words cold and emotionless. "Unauthorized access detected. Emergency purge in progress." Xivan froze. What? What does that mean? His chief engineer turned pale. "Sir, they hacked our fleet." Xivan's heart nearly stopped. "What?" The engineer's hands shook as he stared at his datapad. "They took over our ships. They rewrote our systems while we were attacking. They own US, sir." Xivan's entire world crumbled in that moment. He had expected a battle. He had expected resistance. But what he had never expected was complete domination. The human admiral's voice returned, smug and amused. "Hey, Admiral Xivan, right? Listen, we could destroy you right now, but honestly, it's more fun watching you panic." The human crew behind him erupted into laughter. Xivan clenched his fists, his mind racing. There had to be a way out. There had to be. But before he could speak, his ship jerked. The Tyrant's Wrath, the most powerful dreadnought in the fleet, moved, not by its own power, but by some invisible force. It was dragged out of position, spinning helplessly like a child's toy. Xivan gritted his teeth. All ships, reat now. But it was already too late. One by one, the human ships disappeared from sight. One by one, Imperial warships imploded, their systems turning against them. And then, the final blow. The Tyrant's Wrath lost all power. Lights dimmed. Weapons shut down. The mighty warship stopped moving entirely. The humans had won. And they had done it without even firing a shot. Silence fell over the remains of the Imperial fleet. Then the human admiral spoke one last time. "Welcome to the real galaxy, Admiral. You're playing by our rules now." The transmission cut, and Xivan finally understood. This wasn't a battle. This was a warning. And the Empire had just made the worst mistake in its history. The joke's on the Empire. Admiral Xivan stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the impossible. The Galactic Empire had always been superior. They had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years, crushing every enemy with overwhelming firepower. Every species that had dared to resist them had been erased from existence. And yet here they were, trapped, humiliated, defeated before the battle had even begun. His once mighty fleet floated helplessly in space. Hundreds of warships, now useless. Their weapons refused to fire. Their engines refused to obey. The ships didn't belong to the Empire anymore. They belonged to the humans. Xivan clenched his fists. How did they do this? His officers were silent, their faces pale. They had no answers. There were no answers. Then, a new message appeared on the screen. The humans again. The same gray-haired admiral, still smirking like he was enjoying a comedy show. "All right, fellas," the human said, leaning back in his chair. "We've had our fun, but it's time for the main event. You ready?" Behind him, human officers cheered. Someone even threw their hands up and shouted, "Let's give him a show." Xivan felt a deep, sickening dread in his stomach. What are you planning?" The human admiral gave him a mischievous look. "You'll see." And then, the entire Imperial fleet started moving, not under their own power. The human ships dragged them. Massive Imperial warships, each the size of a city, spun like children's toys. They were flung across space, crashing into one another. It was complete chaos. Ships collided, breaking apart, their armored hulls cracking like fragile glass. Xivan gritted his teeth as the Tyrant's Wrath itself trembled. The Empire's most powerful warship, now nothing more than a plaything. The human admiral's voice returned, full of laughter. "You guys take yourselves way too seriously. Let's loosen up a bit, huh?" Xivan's hands trembled with fury. "Stop this madness." The human admiral raised an eyebrow. "Madness? No, Admiral. This is called fun. You should try it sometime." Behind him, human officers were laughing uncontrollably. But the worst part was that they weren't laughing out of cruelty. They weren't mocking the Empire like a victorious enemy would. They were laughing because they genuinely found this hilarious. Xivan felt something he had never felt before. Not just fear, shame. The Empire had always believed itself to be the most powerful force in the galaxy. But these humans, they didn't even see them as a real threat. They were playing with them. And then, the human admiral did something completely insane. He raised his hands. "All right, Gentlemen, time to wrap this up. Fire the party cannons. Slyvan barely had time to react. The what? Suddenly, explosions erupted across the fleet. But they weren't normal explosions. Bright, colorful fireworks burst into space. Fireworks. Ribbons of dazzling light spread through the void. Confetti rained down, appearing out of nowhere. And worst of all, music started playing. Not a battle anthem. Not a war march. A cheerful carnival tune. Slyvan's officers stared in horror. Sir, they're throwing a party. Slyvan's fists shook. His fleet was being dismantled by fireworks and music. He turned back to the human admiral. What are you doing? The human grinned. Oh, just celebrating your first loss. You know, for the memories. Slyvan's anger boiled over. You insolent little. Before he could finish, his screen glitched. The human admiral's face flickered, replaced by something else. A meme. A poorly drawn cartoon of an imperial officer crying, with big, exaggerated tears. Above it, glowing words flashed. When you try to invade Earth, but they turn it into a joke. Slyvan's blood pressure skyrocketed. His officers looked away in embarrassment. This was humiliating. They had lost control of the fleet. They had lost control of their weapons. And now, they had lost control of their dignity. The humans had reduced the greatest fleet in the Empire's history into a laughingstock. And worst of all, the rest of the galaxy was watching. Slyvan's screen flickered again. Dozens, no, hundreds, of alien species were broadcasting the battle live. From peaceful traders to hardened warlords, every race in the galaxy was witnessing the impossible. And they were laughing. A reptilian species leader wheezed. The Empire, reduced to a party trick. I snark. I can't breathe. A mechanical AI overlord chuckled. Error. Laughter detected. This is highly entertaining. Even the warlike Craxian warriors, who had once fought the Empire in brutal battles, were clutching their sides. By the stars, this is the greatest battle in history. Slyvan could feel his empire's reputation burning to ash. His fleet, once feared across the galaxy, was now a galactic joke. And the humans, they were just getting started. The human admiral leaned back in his chair, stretching like he had just finished a workout. Well, that was fun, but I think it's time to send you home. Slyvan stiffened. What do you mean? The admiral winked. You'll see. Suddenly, every Imperial ship vanished. 1 second, they were in Sol's system. The next, they were back in Imperial space, dumped there like garbage. Their ships were still broken. Their systems were still compromised. And worst of all, their humiliation was now permanent. As Slyvan sat in stunned silence, a final message appeared on his screen. Thanks for playing. Try again next century. Maybe. Then, the message self-deleted. Slyvan's trembling fingers curled into fists. His officers were silent, their faces drained of color. The Galactic Empire, humiliated beyond repair. And the worst part, the humans weren't even trying. Panic in the Empire's ranks. Admiral Slyvan sat frozen in his command chair, his mind spiraling into chaos. One moment, his fleet had been the dominant force in the Sol system, ready to crush the humans and claim Earth for the Empire. The next, they were here, back in Imperial space, thousands of light years away, dumped like broken cargo. The massive dreadnought tyrant's wrath drifted aimlessly, surrounded by the wreckage of its once mighty fleet. Engines refused to engage. Weapons were offline. Communications were flooded with distress signals from his own officers, each one asking the same question. What just happened? But Slyvan had no answers. The Empire had never lost like this. Not just a defeat. No, this was something worse. This was mockery. And across the galaxy, everyone was watching. A deep, shuddering breath left his lips. He turned toward his communications officer, who was still trying to re-establish order. "Open a secure channel to the Imperial High Command." The officer hesitated. "Sir, I think you should see this first." A massive screen flickered to life, displaying the Imperial News Network. And what Xivan saw made his blood turn to ice. The Empire, a galactic laughingstock. Humans humiliate Imperial fleet in record time. The broadcast was everywhere. Every screen across the Empire, every communication channel, every personal data pad, every citizen was seeing the same thing. A montage of the battle, compiled from various sources. Imperial warships being tossed around like toys. The human admiral smirking like a mischievous child. Fireworks exploding in the void of space. This sad Imperial officer meme blinking on screens everywhere. And the worst part, the laughing. Not just from the humans, but from every alien species in the galaxy. A recorded transmission from a Craxian warlord played next. "You mean to tell me?" He gasped between laughter. "The great empire, the conquerors of 1,000 worlds, got defeated by humans who didn't even fire a real shot." The camera zoomed in on his face as he wiped a tear from his eye. Oh, this is priceless." Other species chimed in. A reptilian trader hissed, "Maybe the Empire should start selling fireworks instead of weapons." A robotic AI overlord declared, "Error. Empire's military strength has been downgraded to mild inconvenience." A group of feline-like diplomats simply purred in amusement, one of them waving a tiny Empire flag and pretending to cry. The broadcast cut back to the humans, who had released their own response. And it was the final insult. A dance video. Footage of Earth's celebration, humans throwing parties in the streets, soldiers on starships dancing, civilians drinking and laughing, all while the words "easy and lol" flashed in bright neon colors. Savon's hands clenched into fists. His entire body shook. They had made a joke out of his fleet, out of his empire. And the galaxy was loving it. The transmission abruptly cut, replaced by the face of the Imperial Grand Chancellor, Savon's direct superior. His expression was dark. "Admiral Xivan," the Chancellor said, his voice cold. "Explain." Now. Xivan opened his mouth, but what could he say? That they were outmatched. That the humans had played with them like they were a toy. That they had lost before the fight even began. It was unacceptable. The humans used advanced technology beyond our understanding. Xivan forced out. "They interfered with our ships. They—" "Do you mean to say," the Chancellor interrupted, "that the greatest fleet in Imperial history was hacked? That our glorious warships were outmaneuvered like children's playthings?" Xivan swallowed hard. The entire High Command was watching. And in that moment, he knew. They didn't care about the details. They only cared that the Empire's invincible reputation was gone. The Chancellor leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. "Admiral, do you realize what this means?" Xivan said nothing. The Chancellor's eyes burned with fury. "The Empire thrives on fear. That is what keeps our enemies in line. That is what maintains our control. And you," his voice turned sharp, "you just shattered that fear." Sivan's heart pounded. The Chancellor's voice was like a blade. "Do you think our enemies won't act? The moment they see us as weak, they will rise. And you have given them the perfect reason to strike." The realization hit Xivan like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just humiliated them. They had doomed them. The illusion of the Empire's invincibility was broken. And now, war was coming. The Empire's enemies take action. Across the galaxy, rebel factions, suppressed planets, and rival species were watching the humans' victory with wide-eyed disbelief. For centuries, they had lived in fear of the Empire's war machine. But now they laughed. And laughter was more dangerous than any weapon. Because if humans, primitive newcomers, could defeat the Empire so easily, then maybe, just maybe, the Empire could fall. And so, in the darkness of space, the whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. Old enemies began mobilizing fleets. Oppressed planets started plotting uprisings. And deep within the Imperial Palace, the Emperor himself sat in silent rage, watching the footage on repeat. He had built an empire that was feared across the stars. And now, thanks to the humans, it was a joke. His hands curled into fists. This cannot stand. A cold, deadly resolve filled his eyes. If the humans thought this was over, they were wrong. The prank war begins. Imperial Palace. The Emperor's wrath. The throne room of the Imperial Palace was shrouded in darkness. Only the dim glow of a massive holographic display flickered across the towering chamber. The footage played on repeat, the greatest fleet in the Empire's history reduced to a joke. The Emperor watched in absolute silence. His golden armor gleamed under the light, but his expression was stone. His hands rested on the armrests of his throne, fingers tightening with each replay of the footage. The humans hadn't just defeated his fleet. They had humiliated the Empire. And worse, they had made the entire galaxy laugh. His generals stood before him, trembling. No one dared to speak first. No one dared to break the silence. Finally, the Emperor exhaled, his voice like a low, rumbling storm. "Admiral Sci-Fi." Sci-Fi stepped forward stiffly, his body tense. "Your Majesty." The Emperor's gaze did not move from the screen. "You led my fleet. You wielded my power." Sci-Fi swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty." The Emperor leaned forward. "And you allowed this farce to happen." Sci-Fi opened his mouth, then hesitated. No excuse would be enough. The Emperor's eyes darkened. "Do you know what you have done?" Sci-Fi clenched his jaw. You have shattered our dominion," the Emperor hissed. "You have made the Empire a laughingstock. And now," he gestured toward the galactic map, where rebel signals were flaring up like wildfire. "Now the galaxy sees an opportunity. The weak will rise. The desperate will rebel. All because you failed." Sci-Fi felt his stomach drop. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, eyes cold. "The humans." He let out a slow breath. "They think this is a joke." A chilling silence fell over the room. Then, suddenly, the Emperor smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator. "Then let us play along." The generals exchanged nervous glances. The Emperor's fingers tapped the armrest. "Deploy the Doom Guard." Gasps rippled through the room. Sci-Fi stiffened. "Your Majesty, that." The Emperor's eyes snapped to him. "Is there a problem, Admiral?" Sci-Fi bit his tongue. The Doom Guard were not regular soldiers. They were monsters, handpicked from the most brutal warriors in the Empire. They did not take prisoners. They did not fail. They were the Emperor's personal response to humiliation. The Emperor's voice was smooth, almost amused. "Let the humans laugh while they can. Soon, they will learn what it means to mock the Empire." The order was given. And the real war began. Earth, the unexpected counterattack. Back on Earth, the celebrations were still going strong. The Battle of the Sol system had been the easiest fight in human history. Admiral Reynolds sat back in his chair, sipping his coffee while watching the galactic news reports. The memes were spreading at light speed. His personal favorite, a heavily edited image of an Imperial fleet trapped in a giant clown car with the caption, "Empire's latest war doctrine, Cirque du Soleil." He nearly spit out his coffee laughing. Man, these guys really thought they could take us. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Harris, chuckled beside him. "Best part, they haven't even figured out how we did it." Reynolds smirked. "Let 'em wonder." The truth was simple. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of messing with people. While the rest of the galaxy focused on warfare, humans had mastered cyber warfare, quantum disruption, psychological manipulation, And most importantly, trolling. Earth didn't need brute force. It just needed one good hacker with a grudge. And thanks to thousands of years of human culture, from online gaming to practical jokes, the entire species was built for psychological warfare. And the Empire? They had no defense against that. Harris grinned. So, what's the next move? We pressed the advantage. Reynolds shook his head, still grinning. Nah, we let them make the next move. Harris raised an eyebrow. And what if their next move isn't so funny? Reynolds' smirk faded slightly. Because the real question wasn't if the Empire would retaliate. It was how. And they were about to find out. The Doom Guard arrives, and immediately regrets it. The Doom Guard, the most feared warriors in the Empire, arrived at the edge of the Sol system in complete silence. No warnings, no grand speeches, just death approaching. Their ships were different from regular Imperial warships. No markings, no identification, just black void ships, each one a silent executioner drifting through the dark. Their mission? To erase Earth. And then, the first transmission came through. It was music. A single, eerie human voice began to sing through their comms. "Hello, darkness, my old friend." The Doom Guard commander, General Kor, blinked in confusion. "What is this?" Another soldier frowned. "Sir, it's a human war chant, I think." The music continued. "I've come to talk with you again." More voices joined in, echoing across their fleet. Hundreds of human ships broadcasting in perfect synchronization. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Even Kor felt a flicker of uncertainty. What kind of psychological warfare is this? Then, a new message flashed on every Doom Guard ship's interface. The words glowed in bright neon. "Welcome to Earth's funhouse. No refunds." And then, the hacking began. Alarms blared as Doom Guard ships started malfunctioning. Weapons detonated on their own ships. Navigation systems locked them in place. And worst of all, every single display screen across the entire fleet played an endless loop of cat videos. A Doom Guard soldier screamed, "Make it stop. ICANTAKENIMOREQT Kor grabbed his head. Abort. Abort. Retreat, no. But it was too late. One by one, the mighty Doom Guard warships blinked out of existence, forcefully teleported across the galaxy, dumped in the most ridiculous locations possible. One ship landed in the middle of an alien wedding ceremony. Another crashed on a swamp planet filled with oversized frogs. One unfortunate warship even ended up inside the Empire's own military headquarters, its crew forced to explain how they got there. The human admiral's final message rang across space. "Hey, Doom Guard. Nice try. But you just got sent home like bad children past their bedtime." And across the Sol system, the entire human race laughed. The Empire's desperate escape. The aftermath of the Doom Guard's failure. The Imperial throne room was silent. The air was thick with tension, so heavy that even the highest-ranking officers dared not breathe too loudly. The Emperor sat motionless, staring at the holographic footage projected before him. It was not the footage of a glorious war campaign. It was a catastrophe. The Doom Guard, the most elite force in the Empire, had been completely humiliated. Instead of raining destruction upon Earth, they had been teleported across the galaxy like wayward children in a carnival funhouse. Some ships had reappeared in hostile alien territories, others crash-landed on deserted moons, and one particularly unlucky vessel was now stranded inside the Empire's own grand treasury, wedged between stacks of gold and priceless relics. And worst of all, the humans had broadcasted everything. Every failed attack, every soldier's panicked scream, every embarrassing moment of Doom Guard warriors losing their minds over cat videos. The galaxy was watching, and they were laughing. The Emperor's hands gripped the armrests of his throne. His fingers dug deep into the ancient gold, leaving behind dents. He had never known defeat. He had never known humiliation. And now, thanks to humans, the name of the Galactic Empire was no longer whispered in fear. It was mocked. One of his advisors, a pale and trembling official named Varkesh, dared to speak. Your Majesty, the reports indicate that the humans are still in control of our systems. They can. The Emperor's gaze snapped toward him. Varkesh shut his mouth instantly. The Emperor stood slowly, his golden robes flowing behind him like a storm. Contact Admiral HFY. A nervous officer rushed to comply, pressing a series of commands into his console. A moment later, the massive screen flickered, and the image of a very, very distressed HFY appeared. The Admiral's uniform was disheveled, his usually pristine appearance now marred by sweat and frustration. Behind him, the bridge of the tyrant's wrath was in chaos, officers scrambling to fix their damaged systems. HFY straightened the moment he saw the Emperor. Your Majesty. The Emperor's voice was calm, too calm. Admiral, explain why my most powerful fleet is now a punchline to the galaxy's greatest joke. HFY swallowed hard. We underestimated them, Your Majesty. The humans, they are unlike any enemy we've ever faced. Silence. The single word froze HFY in place. The Emperor took a slow step forward, his eyes dark and unreadable. Tell me, Admiral, can we still win? HFY hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. The Emperor saw it. For the first time in his life, an Imperial Admiral did not believe in victory. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the Emperor spoke, his voice as sharp as a blade. Then we retreat. Gasps rippled through the throne room. Varkesh's eyes widened in horror. Your Majesty, if we retreat now. The Emperor's glare silenced him instantly. Do you suggest we stay and fight a war we cannot win? Varkesh paled. And no, of course not, Your Majesty. The Emperor turned back to HFY. Order the fleet to withdraw from all human sectors. Do not engage. Do not retaliate. HFY blinked in disbelief. You wish to surrender. The Emperor's expression darkened. We do not surrender. We prepare. His fingers curled into a fist. This is no longer about conquest. This is about revenge. HFY nodded stiffly. Understood, Your Majesty. I will recall the fleet immediately. The transmission ended. The Emperor turned toward his advisors. Erase all records of this campaign. Every failure, every embarrassment. Destroy it. Varkesh nodded frantically. At once, Your Majesty. The Emperor's gaze burned with fury, and issue a decree. The advisors leaned forward. From this moment forth, the Sol system is to be declared forbidden territory. No Imperial forces are to enter it. No mention of Earth shall be spoken in official records. The humans, his voice lowered to a deadly whisper. They do not exist. Silence. Then one of the younger advisors, too bold for his own good, whispered, But what if the humans decide to expand? What if they attack us in the future? The Emperor smiled. Not a pleasant smile. A smile of a man who had already decided the fate of an entire species. Oh, they will, he murmured. They will grow bold. They will grow careless. And when the time is right, we will burn their world to ash. His eyes gleamed with the promise of vengeance. This is not over. The Empire would wait. And when the moment came, the humans would regret ever mocking the Emperor. Earth. The party continues. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was still celebrating. Across the planet, cities were filled with people dancing in the streets, massive holograms playing replays of the battle, and new memes flooding the intergalactic network. One particularly popular meme was a doctored image of the Emperor's throne replaced with a baby's high chair with the caption, "The Emperor is having a tantrum. Give him a pacifier." Admiral Reynolds nearly choked on his drink when he saw it. Oh man, they're never gonna recover from this. Lieutenant Harris laughed. I mean, they ran. They straight up ran. We didn't even fire a single real shot. Reynolds smirked. Yeah, but they're not gonna forget this. Harris's smile faltered. You think they'll come back? Reynolds leaned back in his chair, staring out into the endless void of space. Oh, definitely. But that's a problem for future us. He lifted his drink. For now, we enjoy the victory. Harris grinned. Cheers to that. And so, while the Empire seethed in bitter humiliation, humanity did what it did best. Laugh. Because at the end of the day, war was serious. But making the Galactic Empire look like fools. That was just good entertainment. Earth's biggest secret. A new era begins. The Galactic Empire retreated. The news spread like wildfire across the stars. The once invincible empire had not just lost. It had been mocked out of existence. No grand speeches, no dramatic last stands, no glorious sacrifices, just humans laughing in their faces until the empire realized there was no point in fighting. For the first time in over 10,000 years, the empire feared someone else. And they did the only thing they could. They erased Earth from their records. No official mention of humanity. No history of their encounter. No discussions of Sol system. The greatest humiliation of the Empire's history had been buried. But that didn't mean the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Because while the Empire hid its shame, the rest of the universe celebrated. The aftershock across the galaxy. For centuries, entire species had lived under the Empire's boot. Planets had been conquered. Civilizations had been erased. Races had been turned into slaves or forced into silence. Now, the fear was gone. The Empire had ruled with terror, with the belief that no one could challenge them. But the humans had proven that was a lie. And worse, they had done it without even trying. Suddenly, planets that had once trembled before the Empire's might began to rise. Rebellions broke out across the stars. Secret resistance groups that had been lying in wait for decades suddenly struck with new confidence. If humans could beat the Empire, then why couldn't they? Humanity's victory, and the truth no one knew. Meanwhile, on Earth, the celebrations were still in full swing. People were partying in the streets. Fireworks exploded over every major city. Memes flooded the intergalactic network. It was the biggest win in human history. And yet, deep beneath the surface of Earth, inside an underground military base known only as Black Vault, a group of people sat in a dimly lit conference room, watching the reports. There were no celebrations here, no laughter, no champagne, only calculated silence. At the head of the table, an older man with steel-gray hair tapped his fingers on the surface, his gaze locked on the massive holographic screen displaying the aftermath of the battle. The screen showed panicked Imperial officers, retreating warships, the Emperor himself burning with silent rage. A woman with sharp eyes and a military uniform spoke. They bought it. The older man nodded. They bought it. Another officer chuckled under his breath. They actually think we were just messing with them. The older man smirked. Good. Because here was the truth. Earth had not won this battle by accident. It had not been luck, or a simple prank war, or a casual hacking incident gone out of control. It had been planned. Every moment, every move, every laugh. Humanity had never been weak. For centuries, Earth had hidden its true power. While the rest of the galaxy saw them as newcomers, humans had been advancing in secret. Quantum-based technology, perfected decades ago. Teleportation and instantaneous movement, a classified project for over a century. Cyber warfare, more advanced than any civilization had ever known. But the greatest weapon humanity had: perception. For decades, Earth had let the galaxy believe it was insignificant, a planet of dreamers, explorers, and harmless jokers. But in reality, humanity had been watching, studying, preparing. And when the Empire had finally come for them, Earth had chosen not to destroy them, but to break them in a way they would never recover from. Not with weapons, not with war, but with laughter. Because they knew something no other species in the galaxy understood. Fear can be overcome. Defeats can be avenged. But humiliation, that lasts forever. And now the Empire would live in fear of Earth, but never dare attack them again. Because even if they built a stronger fleet, even if they spent centuries plotting their revenge, they would never forget the moment they realized the truth. Humanity had never taken them seriously, and that was scarier than any weapon. The older man leaned back in his chair, a small smirk on his face. "They think they got off easy," he murmured. The officers around the table chuckled. The woman in uniform raised an eyebrow. "And if they ever come back?" The older man's smirk widened. Then, for the first time, his gaze locked onto the footage of the Emperor, seething with rage. "We show them what we were actually holding back." Epilogue. The Empire's last hope. Deep in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor sat alone in his chamber, staring at a single message flashing on his private screen. A message from one of his spies, hidden deep within human society. The words were simple, and they filled him with more terror than any defeat he had ever faced. The humans were never weak. They let us win. Pray they never take us seriously. The Emperor's hands clenched into fists. Because in that moment, he realized the true horror of what had happened. The humans had let them retreat. Not because they couldn't destroy the Empire, but because they didn't need to. They had already won. And the worst part, they were still laughing.